today we're talking about social, religious, and popular culture.
So we have a bunch of great questions here, and some of them we could answer and some of them we couldn't. So we're going to answer the ones that we're really excited to talk about with y'all, and then we'll go over what we couldn't answer. So one of the questions, about 4 down on the list, is national religion and colonial history of Christianity in Latin America. How is this viewed by different groups in Latin America? And I'm grouping these two together because we had a very interesting experience with religion and power, I would say, within Nicaragua. For one, we managed to go to a church, and something that our colleague Franny had mentioned was that most of the churches that she's been to they had a similar structure. It was all laid out, it was very uniform, and to me this symbolizes an industry, like a power structure, like something so organized that no matter where you are in the world, the meeting can be similar, or you can get similar messages or similar activities out of those. So I'm kind of grouping religion and power together as like a really strong force in Nicaragua, and we saw that with Franny's observation, how that's global, but also with the Daniel Ortega campaign. His slogan was socialism, community, and Christianity. And actually a lot of groups in Nicaragua got really upset because he was using Christianity as a part of his political campaign as a way to get more votes, which is another way to use religion in Nicaragua as a force for power and control. And then there were local perspectives too about how religion has filtered into their lives and has really aided them in helping them live. So our host mother would say, "Oh, I've been working here for so long, it's been 10 years, thank God." Or I miss my daughter, she's in Spain, I can't wait to see her, thank God she's there, she's having a better life. So religion was also associated with opportunity and stability and like safety and love. In Nicaragua, like the colonial history of Christianity has really like weaved itself into the political, social, and popular culture of Nicaragua.
Yeah, and it was really interesting how the same thing could be used to kind of like argue different sides or like create support for different sides, because it was almost like understood that everyone kind of accepted it. And so if you said like, this is, like we're aligning ourselves with this Christian ideal, then you were almost ensured to like have support. So that just showed how powerful like that Christian presence is. Another question was, how has the U.S. globalization in Nicaragua affected perceptions about the ideal quality of life? And while we didn't specifically ask people about this, or I didn't, things that I observed were just different things in the media, and like we talked about all the pictures that we saw and advertisements for like people with lighter skin. And I don't know if this is particularly like U.S. globalization, but definitely kind of like Western globalization. And another thing that really stood out to me was the Lacoste store at the mall. And I just keep thinking about this over and over again, because like, why is there a high-end French store in the second poorest country in the world? Like, I just don't understand. It's just crazy. But I think that's just a huge part of globalization, and like, to me, this might be a conspiracy, but like that presence is just like kind of subliminally sending a message to people like, this is what you should want, and like this is what you should wear, and like your culture doesn't matter because this is like what everyone in the world wants to wear. So that was my impression of that.
And to add on to that, she was just hitting on clothing and fashion trends, which is another question here. And I noticed that most people dressed conservatively, but those who wanted to dress in a different way or dress more American, they would go to stores that said American clothing. But from my observation, and Susan's too, a lot of those clothing items that were available there could have been found in the United States too, which could also symbolize like globalization of like how this clothing is coming from China and is being shipped to Nicaragua, but the image of America or the United States as wearing that clothing is used as a marketing tool for that clothing, although it wasn't actually made in the U.S. or some people don't wear it in the U.S. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Another question is that we felt like we could answer is, how do Nicaraguans perceive Nicaragua in the global world? Bless you. A few responses that I heard throughout our trip was that like people are pretty aware that Nicaragua is a very poor country compared to the rest of the world, and also how safe Nicaragua is like compared to other countries in Central America, and they were proud of like their border control with drug trafficking, and they were pretty proud of their police force.
Yeah, and to add on to that, another dimension is how they view their government. When we went to the U.S. Embassy, they gave us a very interesting perspective about how for some Nicaraguans, anything is better than the war or the revolution or how it was back then. So the Sandinista government has nationalized healthcare, has nationalized education, and health conditions within the country have improved. So some people feel that they don't really need to critique their government or think twice about whether or not they're getting all the benefits that they should from the government. And so what I found was that some Nicaraguans, including my host mom too, when I asked her what she thought of the government, she said, meh, I get what I need, and she didn't really think anything of it. So from my understanding, most Nicaraguans think that the government is better than it was before, so why complain? And so I think that's a very interesting perspective that we found socially within Nicaragua.
One person said that they would rather be really hungry than to lose their son in war. So that was just a huge perspective to get.
So there was just a couple of things that we didn't really get to, or just didn't touch on very much, but some other groups have touched on, like indigenous culture, and is it practiced or lost? We didn't talk about that a whole lot, and we didn't come into very many groups who really emphasize the importance of indigenous culture and practice. We do know that Ron and Ross, which are the two states on the eastern side of Nicaragua, are the most indigenous, but it seems that they keep their activism and their practices within their region. But since they're so isolated from what some Nicaraguans called the more globalized part of Nicaragua, some of those practices never really got out of Bossawa or the forested regions. So we just didn't get a lot of perspective on that.
Another question, how much time does the average Nicaraguan spend doing religious activities per week? We didn't really get a specific answer. I'm sure it varies, because some people we talked to mentioned going to church, but other people didn't.
Popular artists.
Oh yeah, who are popular musicians and artists from Nicaragua? Didn't specifically touch on that. I learned that some popular artists are Dominican.
Yeah, I ran into a lot of people who knew exactly who Bob Marley was and had all of his albums, or who knew who the Beatles were and they had all their albums. So like globalized stars that that we know in the U.S. are also popular in other parts of the world. So that's social, religious, and popular culture.